Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр ороо манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн үндэсний паркын захиргааны ажилтан, зүүн хэсгийнхэн захирал байсан ноён Роберт Макинтош оролцож байна.
Роберт Макинтош Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын үндэсний цэцэрлэгт Хүрээлэнгийн албанд бүс нутаг хариуцсан захирлаар ажиллаж байгаад тэтгэвэртээ гарсан. Байгалийн нөөцийн төлөвлөлт, байгаль, хамгаалал, капиталын бүтээн байгуулалт, орон нутгийн иргэдтэй харилцах хөтөлбөрийг хариуцдаг байжээ. Хятад Монгол Энэтхэг улсуудад төслийн шугамаар ажиллаж байсан Монголын Экологийн Төвийн удирдах зөвлөлийн гишүүн. Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын Дотоод Хэргийн Яамны шагналтай.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for visiting our studio, and please let us know what are you doing on which project you are working in Mongolia.
Well, we want to thank you for the invitation to come and visit and talk to you about our work today. I'm here on behalf of the Mongol Ecology Center, who has asked for assistance in the United States from Global Parks, which is an NGO in the United States composed of volunteer National Park Service retired personnel. So we have put teams together since 2011 and 12 and now 2013 to assist the Mongolian Specially Protected Area Department work on the management plans for Lake Hovsgol National Park and for general help to the department for its management of the protected areas in Mongolia.
There are some certain national parks in this country, about 100 or so, right?
I think it's about 99.
99 national parks in Mongolia. Just one of them is in Hovsgol National
That's correct.
Park.
That's correct.
Why
But
you have a particular selected national Hovsgol Park?
Well, when the Mongol Ecology Center invited us to do this work,
Which is NGO?
NGO in Mongolia, they invited us to do their work, and they had screened many of the parks throughout the country and realized that the challenges at Lake Hovsgol were significant and that assistance there was a high priority. There are many NGOs, international NGOs working in Mongolia, but most of them to date have been working in the Gobi or in the Eastern Steppe, and there's been many years since anybody has worked to assist Lake Hovsgol.
Well, out of many, this all 99 projects you said, Hovsgol is a particularly urgent one. It requires a lot more attention. Why?
Well, I think what we realized right away was that transportation improvements to allow people to get to Lake Hovsgol, to Khatgal, are improving rapidly. Just last summer, the road was paved from Moron to Khatgal, and so now the ability to get there in 3 or 4 hours is easily done with an air flight to Moron and then an hour drive.
But that's what we wanted all the time, and
Well,
now finally we can get a lot there.
That's excellent, but when you get there, you want the park to be prepared for the number of people that are going to be coming. In 2011, there were somewhere in the order of 20,000 people who visited. In 2012, there were 40,000+ people, and they're expecting that number to increase. And the accommodations, the service level, the information level, the park services that are provided to the people are inadequate to start with, but certainly inadequate when you get a large number and an increasing number of people.
Yep. So the concern is now when Hovsgol, which is national park and a very pristine water reserve of clean water of not only Mongolia but whole world.
Yes.
And now today is in danger because it is not yet ready to accept so much, about 50,000 people a year during the summer few months.
Right, and there are additional private individuals and corporations who want to develop the park even more to accommodate these visitors. And that can be accommodated, but it needs to be done in a planned and organized way. And various things such as sanitation, human waste are inadequate to serve the number of people that are going there now, and that needs to be addressed as a very high priority.
You said sanitation and the standards.
Yes.
please tell us about how do you see, what is the situation there?
Well, if you read the standards that we were given in 2011 and 2012, and then you look at what's on the landscape, you will see that these standards have not been followed. Permits were given and enforcement has not taken place, so there are gear camps that are too close to the water according to the standards. There are sanitation facilities that are inadequate according to the standards. So in general, the place is not providing the service level, and it's in many cases it's not attractive. People are hesitant sometimes to visit there or to stay for a long time. But the potential is unbelievable. There's great opportunity for saving the nature and providing visitor services at Lake Hovsgol if it's done properly.
You have met, you have several times you have visited, right?
Yes, I've been there 5 times now. 2011 in the summer, the winter of 12, summer of 12, winter of 13, and now the summer of 13.
And you have traveled around the Hovsgol, or how
We've traveled, we've driven from here all the way to the lake. Takes about 2 days now. That will shorten as the road from Ulaanbaatar to Moron is paved. And then we've driven, there's a very unimproved dirt road that goes up the east side of the lake. It takes about 10 hours if you're lucky. This summer it took 12 hours to go up and about 9 hours to come back, just based on weather condition, rainy day, good day. And then we visited with the people in Hank for 3 or 4 days, and then we drove back down to Hatgal. In the wintertime, we leave Hatgal, we leave Hatgal at about 6 o'clock in the morning. We're in Hank for lunch, and we drive back in the same day, because over the ice you can go very quickly.
Okay, please tell us about how does U.S. National Park Service?
Tell us about the U.S. National Park Service?
Where you have been working a lot, many years.
Yes. Well, I worked for the U.S. National Park Service for approximately 40 years. And in 2016, the U.S. National Park Service will celebrate its 100th anniversary. So the first park was established in 1872, and that's Yellowstone National Park in the state of Wyoming and Montana. And shortly thereafter, there were several parks established. So in 1916, they created an organization called the National Park Service to manage all the parks consistently. So we have branding with the arrowhead, which is an internationally known symbol of the National Park Service. We have a sign protocol. So when you see a Park Service sign, you know you're going into a national park. There's a big entrance sign announcing your arrival, and there are standards for signs throughout the parks to guide you on your way or to give you information about what you're seeing.
I have visited in Colorado National Park, and also visiting in other states, similar place, also next to highway, where the forests are, national parks are. People, rangers come and they have all around the country the same uniform, very attractive. Look them good, like military guys. And, obviously you were in the same.
Yes, I wore that uniform proudly. Yes.
Why it is to be that much? I mean, how do the people accept it?
Well, people that live in the United States and people from around the world have a great reverence for special places that are scenically beautiful or have interesting biology or are historic places. A national park is Yellowstone or Rocky Mountain or Colorado. Another national park is Independence Hall, where the Constitution for the United States was written and approved. We have George Washington's birthplace, the founder of our country. So we have historic sites and we have natural sites.
Combined all together.
All together under one administration, under the National Park Service.
Welcome. And I also noticed that on a highway you also have a sign, the scenic place to see after 1 mile, then you stop there, then there is a very nicely put a information about the history of the place, the way you see the birds, you see what that is about.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, it's all around all the United States.
Well, the purpose of the park is to protect the resource, the historic site or the natural resources. And in the legislation that established the National Park Service, it says for the enjoyment of all. And we interpret enjoyment to be recreation, relaxation, education about where you. So the purpose of the rangers is for protection and law enforcement, but also for education. So many of the rangers, most of the rangers, play the role of interpreters to tell the story of the resource to the visiting public.
So how do you combine it with tourism? And I mean, people have in here different understanding of that combination.
Right. Well, I think over time, we've built the expectation of what to expect when you go to a national park. I don't want to commercialize it in any respect, but it's almost like a franchise. You know, if you know the brand name, you know what to expect. So if you go to a national park, you generally know what to expect. And it may be topic A or it may be topic B, but you know that you're familiar with how to move in the park, how to get information in the park. So internationally and nationally, people are very comfortable in going into the national parks.
Yeah, luckily today. But in the early days, there was a story with Yosemite Park sort of founder, initiator.
Right.
Tell us about that.
John Muir.
Yep.
John Muir. Well, John Muir was a naturalist who lived in California in the Sierras, and he inspired people to understand and work to save nature. There's a famous photograph with John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt, who was president of the United States in the early 1900s, standing at a very spectacular scenic overlook, talking about the need to preserve Yosemite in perpetuity. But at the same time, there was a battle on a particular river to build a reservoir. And that would to be the water supply for the city of San Francisco. And you can't win every battle. And that one, to John Muir lost that battle, and that reservoir was built, which is immediately adjacent to the park on the Tuolumne River, which flooded one canyon, but the Yosemite Valley Canyon has been preserved.
How do you see the future of Hupsugu National Park?
I think it has great potential. A couple of things to understand that we learned immediately when we came to the country. The scenery is spectacular. It's as good as any scenery in the world. Second, the spiritual, cultural value that Mongolians have held for Lake Hovsgol for centuries, if not thousands of years, about the Mother Sea and the Farther Mountain and the creation of life. The importance of Lake Hovsgol being 70% of the fresh water in this country. It's a national treasure for beauty, but it's a national treasure for strategic purposes, for water supply in the long run. So putting all that together, it's important that the citizens of Mongolia recognize the value of that place, be it the cultural or the natural or the strategic, and that they work collectively to tell people about the importance and work collectively to help the government do its responsibilities and protect the resource.
In the south end and the north end of the city, of the lake, sorry, there is two establishment, two villages.
Right.
Which is right on the water.
Right on the
and
water's
they
edge.
use and somehow, and there are several camps. I mean, camp next to not each other.
Right.
Camps that is still, you said it's too close to the water.
Too close to the water, too close together, yes, according to the standards.
What can we do? How should we change it?
Well, you can't change things overnight, but steadily you have to establish the vision and have the local communities and the people around the country of Mongolia accept this vision. And then you can take steps one by one to start to correct the issues. But at the same time, you're not taking all the development out of the park forever. You want to have people visit the park. We think that a lot of the development for the people that visit Lake Hovsgol can happen in the community of Hatkal and can happen in the village of Hank. That would help the local economy and help protect the resources inside the park. But even with that development, limited development can happen in the park, but again, it needs to be directed by the protected area administration so it's in the right place, meets the standards, and provides the opportunities that the public expects when they visit a national park.
The concern now in Mongolia is, like many other legislations we have here, enforcement.
Yes.
Two reasons. One is maybe the legislation is not very clear-cut standards, I would say. Second, enforcement. And before we develop so much now with the current road development, current increased access, what kind of particular standards we should pay attention for?
Well, you have to start at the beginning. There are standards for the development of a gear camp. They need to be, maybe they need to be updated, maybe they're fine. But the gear camp developer has to follow those standards. If you look across the river in the south side of Ulaanbaatar, in the Bodkin strictly protected area, the world looks at that park as the first protected area in the world, established in the 1700s, 100 years before Yellowstone National Park. People revere that place as the beginning of protected areas worldwide. But now you look and see that one whole valley.
Not only that now, several valleys.
Several valleys. But it has been developed.
And now our politicians want to reline that protected area now. Still a little bit space from that naturally protected area for last almost 300 years. And that's the concern here.
Right. It would be a tragedy worldwide if that happens, because it would set a precedent in Mongolia particularly, that if it's sort of like I make a mistake, consciously make a mistake, and then I ask forgiveness.
But however, there now a lot of people, just ordinary people, wealthy people bought houses there already. Now big, huge size of construction is going on. Is there any way to have that still as a protected area, but there is a property?
That's a very complicated question.
Can we regulate it maybe through taxes or some other meanings? Because these corrupt officials who gave a permission which made them legal, many people bought these apartments and now we cannot kick them out. It is not their fault.
Well, I'm not sure if what you said is exactly true. Even though the official permitted them to build there and permitted those individuals to buy there, that doesn't make it legal. So I think wherever this decision is going to be made, they have to go back to the law that established the protected area, number one. Number two, the regulations under which those permits were given. And I think from the knowledge I have, I think you will find that those permits were illegally given. So the people who are going to suffer are not the developers, not the government officials, but the individuals who have bought some property there thinking that they're doing the right things and paying the right amount of money so that they can live in a nice place.
I agree. You also, if this tendency will go, looks like Hupsukul, there can be another Zaisang, that the same name place.
Well, I would worry about that.
Have you seen any this sort of a larger development there in nearby Hupsukul?
We are, number one, we're aware that there are 40 plus or minus, but 40 permits in front of the ministry at this time asking for gear camp development.
Okay.
We understand that 2 of them are very large developments, much larger than what you would think of in terms of a traditional gear camp. A large resort, individual single-family residences where you would maybe come and spend the summer, that type of development with spas, an airport inside the park. There are only 2 airports in national parks in the United States, and both of those airports existed prior to the park being established. So allowing an aircraft to fly into the park, to land, to bring visitors, would lead next to the possibility of airplanes flying around the park. to take visitors on scenic tours. And while that may be good for the people that are in the plane, people who are there trying to enjoy the nature are going to have to 3-4 times a day listening to the sound of aircraft flying low over the lake so that
Understand.
Welcome.
I mean, that's the second time I hear that all around the place, lake, all were given permission to establish gear camp. And that's the start in here of violation laws. The Taisang and all the mountain things were also, they took permission for tourism purposes. And now they are making already development like this. And the same thing may happen in Hupsugo, which can destroy the very concept itself, right? And then what is the best way to do next? Do we set standard, or do we kick them out, or what is the best?
Well, my perception is that the government, the Protected Area Administration, are reactive to individuals, corporations who come and ask for permission. I don't think that's the right way to do it. Our experience in the national park system in the US, we started somewhat that way. But now we make a determination as to what type of facility, the size of that facility, and where that facility will be. So we put on the map, we would consider a proposal for tourism development or a gear camp that would have 100 beds, would have this type of sanitation facility, you would access this way, you would charge these rates. And the revenue that the corporation or individual would make, part of it would go to the park to assist in the administration, and part of it would go to the profit of the corporation. But right now, the park is broadly zoned, what are called the limited areas. You know, by the legislation and by the permits, I mean by the standard of the limited zone, anywhere in the limited zone, somebody can make a proposal. And that's too general. That's not enough to protect the values of the park, and it's not enough to provide quality services to the visitors.
So it's a matter of putting first the standard, then enforcing it.
Putting the standards and enforcing it, and there's going to be this hardship of transition where you look at what's there now and you say, this is not acceptable, and we have to make change, and we have to move some of these gear camps out of the park completely, or at a minimum, maybe just relocate them. But change has got to come. It's not, the situation in Ulaanbaatar is not the situation at Lake Hovsgol. There's time to make this change relatively simply, relatively easily, and relatively fast. But the park administration needs to take charge and do that.
It's true that some gear camps already almost just next door to the water.
Yes.
Here, there, and this is the problem in the country. I don't know, somehow this government cannot do anything. That's why I think I find very important what we are discussing now. You have mentioned about the fee coming to national park itself.
Yes.
And I observe it, for example, in the US, when you come to a national park, you feel it, you see it. There is a door, special entrance, you really feel, you are given a brochure, information where you can go, what you can do, what you cannot do. What is the situation in at Hupsugo? How do you find this similar things?
No, we don't. And you know, it's very difficult to know that you're leaving the Sum and entering the park. Right now at Hatgal, there's a barrier across the road, like the same thing you find on the highway where you pay the toll. And there's a ranger sitting there. In fact, there's a picture, I think, on the screen that will come up at some point. There's a ranger sitting there collecting the fee.
Yeah, I observed this small table sitting
Right.
just at the door.
And there's no sign that says Lake Hovsgol National Park to proudly...
And the guy cannot represent either. He has a T-shirt, just as any other guest or somebody.
Right.
You cannot make it he's a ranger, right?
Right. I mean, it's very... I mean, they tend to wear the military camouflage type of uniform, so they look like a soldier, they look like a border guard, they look like a park ranger. So when you see one, unless you're up close and can see the symbol, you have no idea who you're looking at or who's approaching you. And in the United States, that's totally different because that uniform is uniquely distinctive to a National Park Service ranger.
This fee, you said sharing the fee.
Right.
Probably one fee for just entrance to the park for everybody and their pay. All goes to the park, right?
Yes.
Second, from the tourism purposes, right?
Yes.
Whatever is for accommodation, all this stuff, everything that from that costs, also a part to be used for park protection, right?
Right, yes.
What would be the share, you think?
Well, in the United States, the fee that you collect at the gate, 80% stays in the park where it's collected, and 20% goes to a general pool because some parks, it's just inefficient, not practical to collect.
So you are connecting whole country with that fee?
Yes. Yeah, 80% stays where it's collected.
Yes.
But then 20% goes into this general pool.
To general pool.
And parks who don't collect fees or collect very little fees.
And it was very substantial.
Have an opportunity to ask for money from that pool.
Yeah, and the fee was $20 or something?
They range anywhere from $20 to $50.
Per person?
No, that's per car for 1 week.
Per car for 1 week.
Yes, and then you can buy a pass that for $80 that allows you to enter any national park in the country with that pass for a year. And then for senior citizens like me, you get a lifetime pass. You pay a small amount of money and you're given a lifetime pass. So I have the opportunity to visit the parks. I paid my fee several years ago, and now I
When you drive the car?
When I drive the car, yeah. Not when my kids drive the car.
Yes. So otherwise, the people inside of the they are not per head.
No.
At all. Okay.
No.
That's a good difference to know.
And for the tourism developments, the corporation is required to pay a percent of its revenues after the expenses of the cost of doing business is deducted. And we put those in tender. So Company A and Company B would look and say, well, there's $20 here. I'll give $2 to the Park Service and keep 18. But Proposal B might say, I'll give 10 and keep 10. And when we look at that, if everything else is equal, we will take the 10 for 10 because it's revenue to that park where the money is generated.
You have been visiting, your NGO was sending documents to our ministries, different ministries the last few years.
Yes.
Overall, what's your feeling of the way how it is administered in Mongolia?
Well, I think the challenges are great. The number of staff people in the protected area system is very small. The headquarters office is very small. There's 5 or 6 people. We have a much bigger system, obviously, but we have specialists with PhDs and experience in our national headquarters, and then we have regional offices around the country. So if a park doesn't have the specialist it needs, it can go to the region or Washington to get some help in solving various problems. I don't think that the capacity of the protected area department in terms of number of people and the skills of the people is where it needs to be. So hopefully they will project a curve of increased staff and increased experience as far as that staff is concerned.
Your NGO, Mongol Ecology Center,
yes,
had prepared certain information, map about the Hovsgol National Park.
Correct.
You published it in 3 languages, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And it's including in Russian.
Russian, English, and obviously Mongolian.
Mongolian. And then in the north, they're more direct access now, and probably they will make a highway one day. and there will be more access and more Russians would come from the north border.
Right. I mean, right now there's 700-800 Russians, tourists who come from the Lake Baikal area to visit Lake Hovsgol. We saw several of them this summer, and they're coming. They said they were coming because Lake Baikal is too polluted, and they want to come to the pure, pristine waters of Lake Hovsgol. So, and that's wonderful for them to have that opportunity. But as that road is improved, and also that border is limited to Mongolians and Russians to cross. Someday one might envision that border crossing be open to international travelers. So tourism excursions to fly to Ulaanbaatar or take the train to Irkutsk, drive 4 hours to the north end of Lake Hovsgol, and either go back the same way or travel down the lake and then fly from Moron to back to Ulaanbaatar. A wonderful international experience to see Lake Baikal, but more importantly to see the headwaters, because the waters of Lake Hovsgol drain down through the Egg River into the Selenge and eventually into Lake Baikal.
Yes, that's the beginning of Baikal. Is sort of out of 700 or so rivers. Right. Connected to Baikal. Only Selenge River is coming into Baikal. Right.
And you know, back to the point that you were making about information. Right now, the park has very limited information to give to the visitors, to tell the visitors about the experience. And we were able to produce what we call a park brochure, which is a very simple statement of the values of the park, a map of the park to give the visitor orientation to the road from Moron to Khatgal, the boundary of the park, the lake, the road from the Russian border down to Hank, and then photographs and various short descriptions of the types of resources that you can see at the park. On this side, the how to get there, story about the lake, and the wildlife and the people that live in that general area. So we provided 15,000 copies. We were lucky to be able to receive a grant from the European Union to do many things here to help implement our plans. And the first thing that we've produced is this brochure. And the visitors that we talked to who saw this, who received this brochure this summer, are very pleased with it. And
that's very good information. I've never seen this map. And I thank you for producing that in the 3 languages that we have been talking about. Obviously, there's one new element now. The people started to buy and bring boats. And we have traditionally one relatively larger boat, Sukubata boat, and then the other smaller comes. What do you think about this new phenomena? Is it to be encouraged or is it to be warned about? What do you think?
I don't think it's to be openly encouraged, but I think through proper regulation and the boats being inspected, private boats can recreate on the lake.
They should pay certain also fee for using that.
We would recommend that would help to pay for the enforcement and the inspection. The biggest fear on the lake could be that old equipment that leaks oil and leaks gasoline would, over one little spill is not going to make a difference, but 1,000 spills over 10, 20, 50 years, you will start to see impact on the shoreline, and you'll start to see negative impact as far as the fish and other resources that benefit from the lake. So it can be done. We do it in our parks in the United States, but it's very carefully managed, because another thing that's of issue is boats from one lake going to another lake might carry vegetation or animals to the lake that doesn't have that. And so if you introduce an exotic species, sometimes the power of that species can take over the environment of the lake. So being very careful about what's introduced to the lake is critical to continue to preserve the pristine character.
So that means when we introduce new ship or new boat, it is to be properly inspected.
Inspected and to make sure that they're clean.
Any greens, any animals can make grasses make a difference.
Right. I mean, there's a critter in the United States called the zebra mussel. It's a little shellfish. It attaches itself to a boat, and it moves from lake to river to river. And when they get there, they are so strong that they can dominate the biology and kill off other species. And Lake Hovsgol is an ancient lake, 5 million years old or more. There's only 5 species of fish in that lake. One of those species is only found in Lake Hovsgol, the Hovsgol grayling. And to disrupt that scientific value of what can be learned from the evolution of fish in Lake Hovsgol, why there are not more, why there are not less. It's a very important story for the world, because Lake Hovsgol, that part of Mongolia, is said to be one of the most rapidly increasing temperature increases in the world.
Global warming.
Global warming, and it's hitting that area strongly and fast. The permafrost that surrounds the lake. That's the only ancient lake in the world that is completely surrounded by permafrost. So the lessons that can be learned by the scientists at Lake Hovsgol can be transferred around the world, so other places can be prepared and make changes appropriately to accommodate climate change.
Well, okay, so it's preferably to have a brand new boat introduced to the lake. If it is taken from another areas, the bottom is to be properly inspected.
Well, power washing and scrubbing is necessary for some of those species.
Very good point. When I was driving all around Colorado, they said you cannot drink pristine small lake in the middle of nowhere, very good, beautiful, in forest pond actually.
Yes.
The guys were saying not drink.
Yeah.
Why? It is you cannot drink. There is some disease. What does that mean?
Giardia.
And why is that?
Well, it's a bacteria that's carried by animals. And I'm not a scientist, and I'm not sure of the exact origin, but it can be carried by wildlife, and it can be carried by domestic animals. And as those animals migrate, or domestic animals go into the water, lakes or streams, to drink and to cool off, and if they defecate, the giardia ends up in the water body. So the animal 100 miles away downriver drinks that, and then they go to another lake and they go into that water. So the disease has spread all over the United States.
You can kill or what?
Oh yes, it can. I mean, most people survive, but it's a very painful disease. It takes weeks to get rid of. And to my knowledge, that doesn't exist here in Mongolia, and hopefully it will never come.
Well, at least for the moment. But it is important to know for Mongolians that with that sensitive small things,
yes,
we can destroy the drinking
right
quality of the Hovsgol Lake, which is even worse danger than compared.
Well, we've been there, like I said, 3 times in the summertime and twice in winter, and we don't hesitate to drink the lake water because we're with that knowledge that it's pristine, and hopefully it will stay that way.
Speaking about that knowledge, there are several expeditions, people from different countries, Mongolian scientists go and do research, and I don't think this database is being created in one area.
That's correct. That's correct. There's maybe 100 years of research that we know about that's taken place at Lake Hovsgol. During the Soviet period, Soviet scientists working with Mongolians were doing research. We know of U.S. scientists who have been there. We know of Japanese scientists who have been there. But the principal investigators were exploring and investigating things that were important to them. So they did their research, and they maybe left a copy behind, but they went back to their universities. We're creating within the Mongol Ecology Center, we're creating the Lake Hufskul Conservancy, which will be dedicated just to Lake Hufskul. And the purpose of this part of Mongol Ecology Center is to provide training for community members and for rangers and park staff, the specialists, to provide the opportunity for discussing community development, economic development, and to provide a science platform for park management. We've created a science committee that's made up of international scientists. We're working on a proposal to do a park-wide inventory and assessment of the natural resources of the park, both on land and in the water. And we're also, from that, we'll set the priorities for research, additional research that is critical for decision-making in the park. Parks must be managed with scientific basic information to base their decisions on. And hopefully in a few years' time, we can have this platform of science. And part of the conservancy will be to collect all of this information that we can get our hands on, no matter where it comes from, and to put it into a database so it's accessible to scientists all over the world through the internet.
Mr. McIntosh, it looks like you spent a lot of time in the national park.
Yes.
What is, just as a human individual, human being, what does that mean for you, for your health, for your way of thinking about life?
Yeah, well, it's a complicated story, but I grew up in the woods in northern Maine, which is in the very northeast corner of New England in the United States. So to me, the natural resources were a part of my family's economy and my life in terms of my dad's work and my recreation as a child. And I always wanted to be able to be there. I didn't want to work in an office. I ended up working in an office, but I didn't want to work in an office. But as I grew older, I recognized that as more people in the United States moved from the countryside to the city, and now 100 years ago, or let's say in the 1850s, 70% of the country lived in the countryside and 30% lived in the city. Now it's more than opposite. It's almost 80% living in the cities, not city, but in the city and the metropolitan areas, and very few in the countryside. There are kids today in the cities of America who do not know where milk comes from. They think it comes out of the bottle or out of the carton. And the same for eggs. And that is very, very destructive in terms of understanding the food chain, how food is produced, how to protect those places where food is produced.
How many children do you have? 2. And do they also like you forests?
Yes, yes. Both of them are very active in the outdoors. They'd rather be outdoors than in school.
How old are they?
One is 22 and he just graduated from college last June. And the other one is 20. He took a year off after high school and traveled in Africa and in Peru, in South America, completely out in nature. And now, reluctantly, he's leaving tomorrow to go to university for the first year.
Well, good luck for him.
Yes, it'll be a challenge.
Mr. McIntosh, what you have shared with us today, I think we have talked not only Hufskul National Park, and I think there are several other beautiful lakes, smaller.
Yes.
But there are, as you said, about 100 national parks around the country. And Mongolians, we have to go through a lot. We are learning. And our conversation was important because we're better to learn from other national parks and to do things in the right way from the beginning.
Yeah.
And your job and your NGO job are important for that. And I would like to thank you for doing that in Mongolia for Mongolians.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I wish good success in your future projects plan. So good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.